In Copenhagen, this movement for real climate justice, demanding the acknowledgement of a climate debt, a very real climate debt, and the beginning of a process of reparations, which means to repair, really had its global debut. Now, that didn't mean that that's where the movement just started in Copenhagen. Of course, it had been building in the global south for many, many years, but it landed on the world stage because the world media was there in Copenhagen, and that particularly the Western media was there, so acknowledged it just a little bit, even if they were mostly distorting it. But here in the United States, the truth is that these issues have not received nearly the attention that they should receive. So I think that this evening, I think this is probably one of the bigger gatherings on the topic of climate debt in the United States. So it's wonderful to be part of that discussion with all of you, and I hope this is the beginning of much, much more like it. Jonathan Pershing is one of the most important climate negotiators this country has. He's the second in command to Todd Stern, and he was speaking on behalf of the United States in the negotiations in Copenhagen, in Barcelona, in Bangkok. He's the voice of this country, along with Todd Stern, when it comes to issues of climate. And he's been saying some interesting things over the past couple of days, and I want to fill you in on this, because of course most of us have been focused on Haiti and haven't been paying much attention to other things. So Jonathan Pershing recently gave an interview where he explained why he had kind of given up on the United Nations as a forum, as a framework for coming up with a solution to the climate crisis, and why he felt that this was a problem that could really be solved by a handful of countries, by this sort of kind of a coalition of the willing model for climate change. And he actually said, we're not really worried about what Chad does. We are not really worried about what Haiti says it's going to do about greenhouse gases, and went on to say they should be focused on the earthquake, not on that. And so basically said, all of you poor, inconsequential, small countries, you don't have to be part of this discussion. The big emitting countries will figure this out and then inform you of what we've done. Very blunt about that. And he also said, and I'm not sure if it was the same interview or a different interview, it was reported separately, that the reason why why Copenhagen did not produce a deal that all countries agreed to was because of a small group of countries, and he named them. He said it was Bolivia, presente, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba. And he said these countries are part of a group that sees this process not so much as a solution to climate change, but in fact as a mechanism to redistribute global wealth. And he went on to say the rest of the world disagree. And I thought it was an interesting statement, and the reason I thought it was interesting is because he is partially right. We are part of a group, I'm proud to be part of it, that believes that there can be no solution to the climate crisis unless there is a massive redistribution of wealth around the world, and we shouldn't be ashamed of that. Moreover, it is precisely countries like Chad and Haiti that absolutely must be part of designing the solutions to this crisis, because they are the ones who are living the effects of this crisis more than many of the countries that are part of that select group. So, and they also, of course, have the most to lose if the agreement is weak, as the agreement in Copenhagen is so decidedly weak. Now, one of the things that we see in Haiti right now so clearly is the intimate connection, the correlation between the pro-corporate policies that in most parts of the world are called neoliberalism, privatization, deregulation, pushing towards export-driven agriculture, and vulnerability to natural disasters. Now, Obviously, I'm not saying that earthquakes are caused by global warming. That is not the issue. This is a natural disaster that is unrelated to global warming. But as we watch the lives lost, not to the quake, but to the inability to respond to the quake because of the frailness of the public sector in Haiti. And here we have many parallels, I think, with what we saw in New Orleans, in this country. We see how these issues are interrelated. We see so graphically the way in which precariousness, economic precariousness, creates so much more vulnerability to natural disasters, whether created by climate change or otherwise. Houses built on the sides of hills where they shouldn't have had to have been built. The lack of housing codes, the lack of first responders. And this is all massively exacerbating the death toll. We can see this already. So this is not simply a natural disaster. So what we're seeing in this terrible tragedy is how crucial it actually is to address these underlying economic failures if we are to be able to survive in a world of increasing climate volatility, which we're already living in. We're not talking about the future, we're talking about right now. So if there is anything positive that can possibly come out of this tragedy, it may be that we are never ever able to say again that there isn't a direct relationship between poverty, between inequality, and our ability to collectively respond to the climate crisis. It is also, as we can see so clearly, an issue of basic justice. One of the big changes that I think the environmental movement is going through is that the arguments that the sort of big NGOs have always made in terms of why we should care about this issue, it's always been about erasing difference. This is one issue we're told that where we're all in it together. Everybody's got grandkids. Everybody cares about this one. And we may disagree about everything else, but not this. We're all in this together. And we are all in this together. We are all going to be affected if we don't avert climate chaos. But it's simply untrue that we are all going to be affected in the same way. And we see this in these sort of snapshots of what I can only call disaster apartheid. We saw it in New Orleans, where there was a direct connection between the people who had wealth and resources, the people who were able to get into their cars and drive out of the city and check into hotels and avoid the worst of the disaster, and the people who relied on the state for an evacuation plan, for rescue, and were left on their roofs. So we are not all in this together, nor did we all create this problem together. And that, to me, is the fundamental argument around climate debt, very clearly.